From this lecture, what the two types of dependency injections that Spring offers, namely the constructor injection and the setter injection, and when to use which. Let's consider an example of myService class which uses the DAO. So myService requires DAO to perform what it does. If we use constructor injection, we'll first define a constructor that takes this DAO as an argument, and we then assign this DAO to the DAO field on myService. At runtime, Spring will use this constructor to create an instance of myService. So Spring will first create the DAO and then it will inject the DAO by calling the myService constructor. So this is called constructor injection. Whereas the setter injection uses the setter method. So let's say myService also needs the services provided by a JMS sender to send a message. We can use the setter method to inject that using Spring. Very similar to the constructor, we have an argument here which is JMS sender, and inside the method we are simply assigning the sender on this class to the sender that came in as a parameter. The important question, which one to use, constructor or setter injection? So use the constructor injection when the fields or whatever you want to inject, the dependencies are mandatory. That is, without those dependencies, if the service cannot work or function, then inject them through the constructor. All the mandatory, compulsory dependencies should be injected through the constructor so that by the time that service does whatever it has to do, it has all the dependencies on it. And use the setter injection to inject optional dependencies. So in this case, the service does not require the JMS sender. It is not mandatory. It is optional for the class, whichever is using this service, to send JMS messages. That is why we have made it a setter injection instead. To summarize, Spring supports constructor and setter injection. We can use the constructor injection to inject mandatory dependencies, and the setter injection should be used to inject optional dependencies. It's just a good practice to do that.